Welcome to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series. Today, we're honored to have Sara Ormenyi with us, audio description narrator. Thanks for joining us, Sara.
Hey, Roy. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can hear a smile in your voice.
I'm a very smiley person. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Let's jump right in.
Thank you. All right.
What do you love about audio description narration?
I love the context that it brings to the blind and visually impaired communities. Because if you are to watch a show or a movie that is very heavily reliant upon visual stimulation, maybe it's a beautiful landscape scene that a director really wants to capture the feeling of, or if it's as silly as America's Funniest Home Videos, which I work on, and it's all sight gags. And if you don't have that context, if you don't have the context for what's going on, you really lose out on so much. And it's helpful not only for the blind and visually impaired community, but also for the sighted as well. Because sighted folks like to put it on in the background if they're maybe folding laundry or making dinner or something like that, but they can't always be aware of what's happening on screen. So if you turn on the audio description, you'll hear the context provided around the sound effects and the dialogue and stuff like that. But mainly it brings me so much joy that people who are low vision or who are blind can experience the same things that I, as a sighted person, can experience, because the world is just, it's so much, it's so huge and so beautiful. And I love to bring that to them.
You can hear the passion in your voice too.
It's wonderful.
How did you get into it?
My partner, Bryson Carr, gave a blind guy a lift ride, and he happened to have his own studio. So they got to talking, and Bryson was saying that he had done some previous work in Birmingham, Alabama, where he's from. And the guy, Rick Boggs, said, "Hey, you've got a great voice. Why don't you audition for me?" And so Bryson did. And then I got word of it, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I kind of want to get into this. So I met Rick myself, and then he offered for me to audition for him, and I did. And so six and a half years later, we've gone from audio description to myself. I think I've narrated about 15 audiobooks on my own, and some with Bryson too as well, to commercials, e-learning, corporate narration, and all that sort of stuff. So it gave me this amazing framework from which to start. And it's really only an LA story.
That's great. I'd love to talk to you more about that foundation that you mentioned. But first,
Sure.
Can we talk a little more specifically about how maybe you have changed in those six and a half years, either through the environment or how your own performance craft has changed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found when I first started in audio description, it was really, really helpful for me to be live directed by an engineer or a director, because the delivery of audio description is different than if you were to, say, perform a commercial or perform an audiobook. There are different ways that you want to deliver the content. And very much so the case where if you have a romance scene, you're going to be reading it very differently than if you had a fight scene. And so to get that live one-on-one feedback at first was really, really helpful. And I found it to be instrumental in laying a foundation that I didn't expect for all of the other kinds of work that I've gone on to do in the future. And by I didn't expect it, I don't mean that it wasn't valuable or I didn't think it would have value. I just didn't realize how much value it would end up lending to my craft. And so I have grown by leaps and bounds in the 6.5 years that I've been doing this, and really thanks to audio narration. And as I've gotten further into this, the live directed sessions, especially now with the COVID-19 situation, have diminished. But I take that same foundation that I had when I was being live directed, and I apply it as I'm self-directing. And it's utterly invaluable.
Can you share some of the similarities and differences in that audio description narration foundation? You said that it's grown your career. Comparing audio description to other types of voiceover work that you do, some of the similarities and some of the differences.
A lot of audio description is generally supposed to be delivered in a way that doesn't fully express a lot of emotion, because you don't want to tell the blind viewer how to feel about something, but it gets the point across. So if I'm reading a scene in which the main character is dying and it's very sad, I'm going to have my voice down here. It's going to be sad, but I'm not going to be going like this. I'm not going to be acting that way, because we know that the scene is already sad. And it's sort of similar to commercials and e-learning and corporate narration in that a lot of times they want a steady kind of read, across the board kind of a read, and with some inflections in there. So when I do a children's show doing audio narration, I might be a little bit more happy and a little bit more peppy or something like that. And so those similarities transfer over really well. And like I said, I didn't expect it to give me that kind of foundation that I got, but I'm so grateful for it. Differences, like in audiobooks, you would be acting, you would be putting more of that emotion into it. Commercials too, sometimes as well, but they're all read slightly differently. And I think that there's that sort of baseline of, it's not a lack of emotion, but I don't really quite know how to describe it with English words, but it's a baseline foundation from where you start to deliver from. And if you go above it, that's great. If you go below it, that's fine too. But you always know where that baseline is. And that's a really, really good, safe place to probably keep yourself.
Oh, that's a great way of sharing that nuance here.
Thanks. That's kind of hard. So how do you put the feeling of narrating something into words? It's challenging.
The other narrators that we've spoken to each have their own unique take on it, because everyone has their own approach. And the way that you explained it, it sounded like it's, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. It's not that it's no emotion, and it's not that you're just flat the whole way through. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So you're trying to convey without telling someone what's going on. I might need to say, she cries, because if there are multiple people in the scene, I might need to say Andrea cries, or tears stream down her face or something like that. But I wouldn't deliver that in a robotic tears stream down her face, or in a way that sounds boring or sounds like I'm not involved in it emotionally, because I am. I have many times, as I've been doing audio description, come to a part of the show or the movie that I am moved by. And there have been times where I've had to stop the director and be like, I need a moment, because I'm emotionally invested in this. And so you convey the emotion without going over the top. So if it's, if someone is crying, tears stream down her face. You're getting that point across while still not shoving the context down someone's throat. Maybe the best way I could say it.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
In the 6.5 years that you've been doing audio description, can you think of any specific example of a challenge that you faced, that you overcame within the world of audio description, and how you did that? And you mentioned some things already about learning the way to deliver, either by being directed and adjusting your takes.
Right.
That's a great example. And anything else come to mind, like a problem that you found a way to overcoming yourself?
Usual things like script quality and knowing context for some things. I think maybe if there was one challenge that I think is probably universal for a lot of audio description narrators when you're not self-directing and watching the program yourself, is to understand what is happening. Because if I have some line that seems to be rather generic, but the director's saying, no, there's more context that's needed. We need more emotion. And so I go one way with emotion. No, that's not the right way. Sometimes I actually step out of the booth and I go and watch that particular scene so that I'm understanding it. Because as much as we try to convey the nonverbal expressions in a non-subjective way of the characters on the show or on the movie, sometimes I need that context. Maybe it's an eyebrow quirk. Maybe it's a smirk, maybe it's a frown, maybe someone's baring their teeth. It helps me to understand how best to deliver that line, because it can be ambiguous sometimes. And in that ambiguity, so you just need a little more context. So I think that watching it as I'm self-directing is very helpful. If I'm not being self-directed, then I will sometimes come out of the booth to get the context and go, got it. Okay, now I understand what I'm supposed to do. So minor challenge, but happens, sometimes.
It sounds like you're using the information that you have to bring your best performance to whatever the scene is.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can't really do that as a sighted person without watching it. We do have blind audio description narrators, and they wouldn't maybe have the luxury of that. But if I could, as a sighted person, say, okay, this is what's happening. These are the facial expressions. This is the body language. This is the posturing. This is the whatever. It would give them that context that I, as a sighted person, can have just by watching the monitor. And so then they would also very easily be able to convey that emotion, even if they can't see it themselves.
In the dream world, absolute Sara perfection. Where would you like to see audio description go?
Oh, worldwide. would love to see it in countries that don't have this kind of support network that we have here in America, with providing a certain amount of described content on the broadcast channels. I would like to see it in other languages too. I'm sure that there are, but to what degree? I'm not familiar. And so we tend to, I think in the States, think of blindness as just an us kind of issue. And then when we broaden out, we realize it's an entire world issue. And so I would love to see that. I'd love to see it on pretty much anything, so that the blind audience, wherever they are, would be able to tune in and have that context. Because all I can say is, if you close your eyes as a sighted person and you watch a movie, you're going to miss a lot, and you won't realize how much you've missed until you open up your eyes, or until someone describes it for you. So I think that I would love to see it all over, way more, on every channel, every show that we could possibly describe it for people. Because who knows what people like? Maybe someone really, really likes a show about fishing. Maybe someone really likes a show about makeup. Well, let's do that. Let's bring that context to those audiences.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audiences?
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your interest. And please continue to reach out to any elected officials, to reach out to people within the industry and ask loudly and boldly for more audio description, because it is such an underutilized method of watching a show. Nobody really knows what it is. If I talk to people about it, they have no idea what I'm talking about. And then I have to provide context. So the fact that more people don't know makes me sad. So reach out, continue to tweet, continue to email, continue to Facebook, whatever your method of getting the word out there is about who your favorite narrator is. If you don't know, but you know the voice, call someone, talk to them, call someone at the studio, whatever it might take in order to get more voices heard. And so in the end, the blind and low vision community truly is the one that's served. My job is to deliver it. I want the people who need the content to be able to have it, regardless of where they are at any point in time.
Is there a good way to follow you on social media?
I'm at, I believe it's Sara Ormenyi Voice on Instagram. I'm also Sara Ormenyi Voiceover on Facebook, Sara Ormenyi Voice as well on Twitter. I'm not a huge social media person, but I do have them and I do utilize them whenever I can. So yeah, that's probably where you can follow me. And a lot of shows now are starting to allow the narrator to say, narrated by Sara Ormenyi. And so if you hear that and you like it, tweet about it, let people know, because I would love to provide more work for you, more context.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Maya. It was my pleasure.